Long ago, a young man and his friends went exploring, searching for honey. Trekking through the wilderness, they came to a fissure in the rocky hillside. Our young man, Kemsab, perhaps braver than the others, allowed himself to be lowered into the cave, following the hum of bees until he found the golden nectar prized by his clan. Untying the rope, he gathered up the honey into jars and began to pass them up to his friends. When he had gathered as much as he could, he tied the rope to his waist and signaled to be drawn up. There was no response. He had been abandoned by the others, left to fend for himself. In a panic, he roamed through the cave, searching for a way out. There were tunnels at the back, and he went into one and then the other, his anxiety growing with each step. Belatedly, he recalled the tales by the wise ones of his village, which spoke of monsters hidden in the depths of these hills. Overcome with fatigue, desperation, and fear, he slumped down and fell into a sleep. A sound awoke him sometime later. In the gloom, he could make out the head and torso of a woman. She was gazing down on him, he could feel. Remembering the warnings, he pretended to still be asleep. Eventually, she turned, heading into one of the tunnels, and disappeared. But not before he saw and heard a large tail slithering after her. Thinking it was a dream, Kemsab fell over the state once more. In the morning, he awoke and discovered to his terror that he was surrounded by serpents, staring at him. After some time, he realized they were not threatening him, but nevertheless, they would not leave his side. He stood up, and the serpents slithered into the tunnel the woman had passed through the evening before. Realizing they wanted him to follow them, he did so, there being no alternative. They came to a large cavern, glittering in the soft light with golden gemstones. There, on a throne, sat the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. Well, a half-woman, half-serpent. This then was the legendary Shahmaran, which in Persian, Shah means king or ruler, and Maran means snake. And this was her underground kingdom. Welcome to KS Dragon Court podcast number 5. Shahmaran, snake goddess of Turkey, high priestess of Karahan Tepe. Now Shahmaran, instead of ordering her snakes to destroy the intruder, invited him into her world, falling in love with him. As time passed, he learned many of her secrets, including knowledge on how to deal with potions, make medicines, and more. He stayed so long that he began to grow scales on his skin, which became visible when he was immersed in water. Much like the later tale of the French serpent deity Alicine. But he also missed his family, and Shahmaran could see his heart was torn in two. Though she loved him, she knew that he belonged with the humans above the ground, not with her under it, so she let him go. What happened after has conflicting stories. One was that he became a healer, known for his knowledge and skill, and through that he gained fame as well. The other was that he lived quietly with his family, never disclosing where he had been or with whom. The king fell ill, and the crafty vizier discovered, through trying to find a cure for his king, that only the flesh of Shahmaran could cure him. One version says that Kemsab, being a renowned healer, was called before the vizier and betrayed his lover by revealing that important bit of information. The other was that the vizier came by this knowledge through other means, and then began to search for anyone who had been in contact with the serpents. And when no one would come forward, ordered every person to come to the baths and be immersed in water. Kemsop tried to hide, but was caught and dragged unwillingly to the baths. Of course, once he was in the water, his scales began to show and he was tortured for her whereabouts. Either way, Kemsop found himself in the position of having to return to Shahmaran and kill her, bringing her body back to the king to be eaten. He went with no small amount of trepidation and maybe guilt for what he was about to do. Once he reached her, she told him she already knew why he was there and offered her life to him, allowing herself to be killed rather than ordering his death. Why she did this, who knows? Maybe it was to save his life or to prevent a war between the humans and her serpents. Shahmaran told Kemsop that once she was cooked to make sure to give the king her head to eat, as her tail was poisonous. Kemsop did the grisly deed and gave the meat to the king. Once again, there are two versions of what followed. The first is Kemsop was the healer who betrayed her. The king's life was spared, and the greedy, cunning vizier, wanting the healing power of the serpent flesh, along with potential immortality, snuck a piece for himself, ate it, and died. The other, the one which tells us Kemsop was tortured into betraying her, told the king and vizier what she had said. They cooked, and then the two of them ate her top half, the human part, whereupon they both dropped dead. You see, she had planned her revenge well. Her tail was the top half and her human part the bottom. What happened to Kemsop? Well, either he became the next vizier, or he returned to his village and lived the rest of his life in guilt and grief. Why the disparity? I personally think the first version is the earlier, the correct one, in which he betrayed her in return for position and wealth. But somewhere along the way it was decided to rehabilitate his image, and the story that he was completely innocent has become the main version now told. People betraying those who have loved them and given them much in return for wealth and power happens all the time, and is a continuous theme in our mythological history, but they are rightfully scorned for it. Now, where does fiction meet fact? Well, many of us have heard about Göbekli Tepe, the curious stone structure found only recently, with the animals and plants carved on it, there being an astronomical element to it as well. But not far away, there is a similar ancient site, also constructed of stone and was hidden underground, known as Karahan Tepe. This temple has serpents carved all over it, and some researchers have shown that its design makes it very likely that it was used in initiation ceremonies, with the acolyte having to move through this dark and foreboding maze underground, reaching the exit just as the sun rises. Karahan Tepe was built so that the sun shines through the small exit at daybreak, and the acolyte, if he or she had survived the preceding night with its strange sculptures, if they survived and they made it through that doorway, then they would have been welcomed into the temple as a priest or priestess. If we look at the story of Shahmaran and Kemsop and try to find the possible truth in the tale, what conclusions might we come to? Personally, I think it was likely that Shahmaran was high priestess of the serpent cult in that time, just as Medusa was. It may be that Kemsop was an acolyte past the initiation ceremony and served in the temple, learning the art of healing and medicines. Not being satisfied with serving as a priest, he left, taking his skills and knowledge with him, and setting up his practice in the capital city, becoming rich and famous in the process. What is interesting about Kemsop and his friends looking for honey is that there is a type of honey known as mad honey, harvested in Turkey called delibal, The bees are attracted to the rhododendron flower and infuse the honey with a neurotoxin known as granotoxin that causes lightheadedness and hallucinations. Mad honey is also found in the Himalayas and has been prized by truth seekers, by kings, by those with money for centuries. So, what if those village boys were not looking for ordinary honey in the first place and came across the Shahmaran's personal stash? Or, if the ingesting of the honey was part of the initiation ritual for any would-be priest or priestess, could Kemsab have relayed what had happened in those tunnels to the others who had not been initiated in a way that they would understand? I mean, picture being in a dark cavern with foreboding tunnels leading off, hallucinating under the influence of mad honey, with snakes all around, real or imagined. How would you talk about it? Especially if it was supposed to be a secret ritual. How could you begin to describe to those who had never been there what had happened? Now, of course, we come to the grisly part of the tale, the eating of Shahmaran. Interestingly, all the way in Japan, there was a similar belief in the power of the serpent or fish woman, the Ningyo or yokai. It was believed that their flesh had the ability to heal and grant immortality if one was lucky enough to catch and kill them. Could it be that the serpent civilization, with its great knowledge of healing practices and attaining longevity, deliberately built up tolerances and immunity to venoms and poisons that also had positive effects on the body? That humans who were not part of the civilization would be unable to ingest as they had not been inducted into that knowledge and had not been built up tolerances? If so, then perhaps when one fell sick and the only cure could come from one of those ingredients, then the only way to safely take it was by eating the flesh of someone who had been ingesting it for years. Now this, of course, is cannibalism. But since when has that stopped a determined person who wants to live? Now, the serpent priests and priestesses were not self-sacrificial beings knowingly taking these potions in order to be carved up and served to people. They did it for their own health and to preserve their own lives as long as they could. Which means that their secret was only made known to other people through betrayal of one of their own. Hence my belief that Kemsab knowingly betrayed Shahmaran, who, being the ruler of the serpent cult, was probably the oldest and had the most powerful immunity through repeated usage. This version might be unpopular with those who prefer to believe that Kemsab was innocent, but I think it more likely that he was a priest who turned against her for wealth, for power, in order to become part of the court. Who knows? But what are your thoughts? If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a comment on the podcast or on social media. You can find KS Dragon Court on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Thank you for listening to KS Dragon Court podcast. Shahmaran, Snake Goddess of Turkey, High Priestess of Karahan Tepe. Join us next time as we explore another fascinating topic in the world of mythology and ancient history. Every week we will be looking at the serpent civilization and some of its amazing gods, goddesses, priestesses, sages, healers, and rituals. If you like alternate history, the occult, temple secrets, and want to know more about the lost serpent civilization, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast. Check out our YouTube channel, KSDC Publishing, Follow us on Instagram and TikTok as Chaos Dragon Court or KSTC Publishing, and check out the Dragon Court books. Ninka, Serpent Priestess, Rhea, Doom of Undal, Cronus, Fall of Undal, and Inanna, Queen of Heaven. There are 3 more books in the works detailing the rise and fall of the Serpent Civilization and their public front, the Dragon Court founded in Egypt. Until next time, please keep exploring the mysteries of the past and never stop asking questions.